One wall has mold along the baseboard every February. The other wall never has. The homeowner has painted both walls 4 times, used the same mold-resistant primer both times, added ventilation, reduced humidity in the room with a dehumidifier that runs all winter. The mold came back in February on the same wall at the same height. The paint is not the difference. This is part of a series on the physics of shelter. If you want the rest, subscribe now, because the next video covers a $25 fix that lowers floor temperature by 18 degrees Fahrenheit in a single winter, and it requires no contractor. Now, the 2 walls. Let me describe them precisely. Both walls are exterior facing, in the same climate zone, on the same house, built in the same year with the same materials. 2x4 wood framing, standard fiberglass batt insulation, half-inch drywall on the interior, vinyl siding on the exterior. No visible difference in construction. Same R-value rating on the insulation package. Same ventilation conditions in the room. One has mold, one does not. The difference is in something that neither wall shows from the inside. It is in where the condensation plane sits inside the wall assembly. Here is the mechanism. Interior winter air in most North American homes carries between 45 and 60% relative humidity. At 50% relative humidity and a room temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 Celsius, the dew point of that air is 54 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 Celsius. That means if any surface in the room drops below 54 degrees Fahrenheit, the water vapor in the air will condense on that surface. The question is, which surface reaches 54 degrees first? If the insulation in the wall is working correctly, the cold zone is pushed toward the exterior, and every interior surface stays above the dew point. The vapor has nowhere to condense inside the room. No moisture accumulates on the wall. If the insulation is positioned incorrectly, or if the ratio of insulation to air gap is wrong, the 54-degree plane migrates inward, toward the drywall surface, toward the room. That is where the mold lives. Now, the comparison. The mold wall and the no-mold wall differ in one dimension: the position of the insulation relative to the interior surface. In the mold wall, the insulation batt was installed flush with the interior face of the framing. No gap between the back of the drywall and the insulation. The insulation is in full contact with the drywall. This means the insulation is pushing its cold face against the room side of the wall. The dew point plane, 54 degrees Fahrenheit, falls at or very near the interior surface of the drywall. In the no-mold wall, there is a deliberate air gap of 3/4 of an inch between the insulation and the drywall back. The insulation was set slightly toward the exterior, leaving an air space at the interior. This small gap has 2 effects. First, it creates a modest thermal buffer between the cold insulation face and the drywall. Second, it shifts the dew point plane deeper into the wall assembly, away from the interior surface. 3/4 of an inch of air. That is the entire difference between February mold and no mold. Building scientists at the National Institute of Standards and Technology documented this mechanism in detail in their 1994 hygrothermal analysis of light frame wall assemblies. Their finding was direct. The location of the condensation plane within a wall assembly is determined primarily by the ratio of thermal resistance on each side of the vapor permeable zone. Change the ratio by shifting the insulation, and the dew point plane moves. Move it far enough toward the exterior, and no interior surface ever reaches condensation. That research was published, It was available. It was not on the installation crew's instruction sheet. This is the villain in its most common form. The contractor who installed the insulation was not careless in any way that an inspection would catch. The bats were full, correctly sized, and in place. The R value was as specified. The only thing missing was a gap that no code at the time required, that added no material cost, and that would have taken 4 minutes per wall to achieve by simply shifting each bat toward the exterior side of the frame. It was not done. Not because of negligence in the legal sense, because nobody told the crew it mattered. The homeowner bought a house with a condensation plane at the interior wall surface on one side of a room. Every winter for the past 6 years, the warm, humid room air has contacted that cold surface, passed its dew point, and deposited water at the base of the drywall. The mold grew where the condensation accumulated. The paint covered the mold. The mold grew through the paint. 4 coats of mold-resistant paint later, the condensation plane is still in the same place. Paint does not move the dew point. Now, the fix. The durable fix for this specific problem is to change the thermal ratio inside the wall. There are 2 paths. The first path is exterior. Adding a continuous layer of rigid foam insulation to the outside of the wall increases the thermal resistance on the exterior side of the assembly. This pushes the dew point plane further toward the outside of the wall, away from the interior surface. A 1-inch layer of polyisocyanurate foam on the exterior, with an R value of approximately 6 to 6.5, shifts the dew point enough in a climate zone 4 or 5 winter to eliminate interior condensation on walls that are already insulated to code. This is a renovation project. It is not a weekend fix. The second path is interior and lower in cost. Remove the baseboards, score the drywall seam at the floor, and inject low-expansion spray foam into the gap at the wall base. Not to add R value, but to eliminate the cold air pocket that sits at floor level against the cold drywall surface. This does not move the dew point plane, but it removes the coldest microzone in the room, which is where the mold concentrates. This is a weekend fix. It costs under $40 in materials. It does not solve the underlying condensation mechanism, but it removes the specific accumulation point that the mold is feeding on. The permanent solution requires the exterior foam. The temporary solution requires the foam at the base. Neither solution is paint. Now, the hygrometer. Put a hygrometer in the room with the mold wall. Read the relative humidity. If it is above 50% in winter and the exterior temperature is below 25 degrees Fahrenheit, -4 Celsius, the dew point of your interior air is below the surface temperature of your exterior wall. Condensation is happening somewhere in or on that wall. You may not see it yet. You will see it by February. The calculation is not complicated. A dew point calculator app on your phone takes the room temperature and relative humidity and tells you the condensation threshold. If that number is above 54 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 Celsius, you have a problem that paint will not solve. What you have is a wall that has been trying to tell you where the cold is for 6 years. The fix was always there. You just couldn't see it. Have you ever measured the relative humidity in the room where mold keeps returning? Tell me in the comments, and whether the mold is always on the same wall or whether it moves. That pattern tells us exactly where the condensation plane is sitting.